And I think it's important to call out that the only way that we do conservation here at the Colorado Natural Heritage Program is by supporting your work, because you are the professionals who are making management decisions, deciding which land is developed and which is protected, managing wildlife, and other ways that you're doing conservation. For years, we heard from you about the struggle that you experienced in having the current decision quality data at your fingertips to support your work. And before Codex, you had to search many places and round up a pile of GIS data and curate a little museum of GIS data all by yourself in order to have the data that you needed. So, to solve this problem, we engaged a working group that transcends agencies, industry, private lands conservation, and others to develop a vision and to name Codex back in the early we started this in 2019, I believe, and working closely with our working group and with NatureServe and with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we launched Codex in 2021. And it's been going strong ever since. We've added a ton of data to it over the years. Um, and I'm delighted that we're going to have the chance to walk you through that, turn you all into power users, and really put this thing to work in the service of your needs and your amazing work on the ground. Um, we are so excited to be in service to you in this role and to help you. You can always pick up the phone and call us when you have questions. Really, talking about Codex is one of our favorite things to do and helping people use it. So always happy to do that. I'm going to turn it over to Michael and let him uh, get us rolling with our training. Thank you so much, and it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Dave. And yeah, we're really excited to see so much interest in the training. I think we had over 180 people register, and we are recording the training. I just started the recording just a moment ago, so everyone knows we'll be recording it. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll have a short slideshow, and then we'll go into the live portion of the training after that. So thanks again, and here we go. If people can admit people as they come into the lobby, that would be great on the CNHP side. Thanks again. I need to move my window over meeting window. It's covering up. Teams always manages to cover up what you want to see, you know? All right. Well, anyways, I'm Michael Menifee, co-team leader of the Conservation Data Services team here at Colorado Natural Heritage Program. And today we're presenting Colorado's Conservation Data Explorer Codex. And really, it's a collaborative tool for all of you to use and supporting good decisions wherever you are in Colorado lands and the work that you're doing. So first, we kind of wanted to give you a little background of who the Colorado Natural Heritage Program is. And CNHP has been Colorado's trusted source of biodiversity and natural heritage data since 1979. We're part of the Colorado State University here in the Warner College of Natural Resources, and we're also a part of the NatureServe network, which I'll tell you a little more about here in just a second. We're collaborators who support decisions by landowners, agencies, practitioners, and industry by tracking locations and statuses of rare plants, animals, and habitats. And we're soft-funded staff of over 50 experts. So we receive our funding through a combination of responding to recall for proposals and donations, but we don't get any direct funding from the state. We really work to support you all. Sort of really fits well with the extension model of being at a land-grant university. It's really a perfect home for us. As I mentioned, we're a part of the NatureServe network, and NatureServe is a network of natural heritage programs in every state in the United States, as well as the Tennessee Valley Authority and the Navajo Nation, and they're also all over Canada. And really, it's the power of coming together as heritage programs that really supercharges our work. NatureServe overall has assessed over 100,000 species and 7,000 different ecosystems classified, and we're together a network of over 1,000 staff. And so we really bring, a rising tide lifts all boats. And the tool we're using today was actually initially developed at NatureServe for other states, and several states have now contributed to its development. So we've been able to bear, well over probably $1 million in development costs, but CNHP certainly didn't need to invest that. So it's a great example of just how NatureServe really helps all of us. And to get after what we do here at CNHP, really, we distill it down to these 5 key questions that we try to answer. And that is, what species and ecosystems exist in Colorado? Of these species and ecosystems, which are at risk or otherwise significant, where are they at? how are they doing? Where are their most and important places to protect for these? And as you can see on the left, we cover across all the different disciplines and recently have really increased our entomology work and have really gotten a lot more information coming in on that. And both plants and entomology and insects have really also gotten some new importance in terms of regulation in Colorado. So we're hoping to fill the void with the data there and work collaboratively with Parks and Wildlife and everyone else to make sure we all have the data we need. Part of how we sort of look at how the species are doing is through this concept of conservation status ranks. And this is kind of how we answer that question too. In other words, we've got global and state ranks of rarity. And really, it's these top three of critically imperiled, imperiled, and vulnerable. So G1, G2, G3, and the equivalent of S ranks as well are the most rare. And you can kind of think of a G3 as globally rare to the point where it's kind of in the waiting room of being concerned. And if we can get to those species early, we can probably prevent them from ever reaching any kind of an imperiled status. By the time you get to a G1, we're looking at, 5, 6 locations left on Earth for that species. One critical note is you could have, an S1 that's very rare in Colorado, but perhaps it's a G5. And if we go back far east where habitat's more numerous, it's everywhere. Maybe we have some Ice Age Pleistocene relic of a microhabitat that's fostering that little plant or something. And so it's got one little occurrence in Colorado. So it could be very significant to Colorado and globally still secure. So just so you understand, we like to consider conservation at all different spatial scales. And so by looking at both global and state ranks, that helps us understand that. When you roll up this data by rarity across the state, you can first see we have a tremendous amount of data in our database. We have on this map taken all of the data and turned them into points. And with the red dots, those are the most rare G1s that I was talking about that are kind of the last stronghold on Earth for these species. And you can see Colorado does have several of those kinds of occurrences. And a lot of them occur in patterns around things like where the Gunnison sage-grouse is, and also particularly where we have a lot of interesting soil substrates that attract certain kinds of plants that are endemics to Colorado and only occur in this state. And we're really blessed to have quite a few endemic plants across Colorado as well. But when you take a look at it, you can see there really is a lot of data in CNHP's database and our biotics database, but also there is some really significant species of rarity in Colorado, even globally. Another way to look at this is rolling up this to try to get to that question of fiber. Where do we go to protect these things? And that's where these potential conservation areas, or PCAs, that CNHP has developed come in. These are not a regulatory concept, so they don't have any regulatory weight. They're a planning tool so that we've identified several areas around those critical occurrences on this last map and then drawn sites around them. You can kind of see there in the middle of the Rockies, that big pink blob where the Gunnison sage-grouse red dots were. There's a large site for that. And the concept of these sites is that we're not saying no human development activity should ever occur within the boundaries within, more that we've drawn the boundaries around these significant occurrences to help perpetuate the ecological processes needed to ensure their continued existence. So whenever we take activities within that larger habitat area, we want to consider our actions and whether they will impact those species. So, but anyways, PCAs do give you a great tool to kind of look at where CNHP data rolls up for the most urgent places to protect. And all of what we do, this has become a favorite slide of ours at CNHP, is really a part of this data to decisions life cycle. And it's really part and parcel of what we do. This is from also a NatureServe helped develop this as well. But, we start out with collecting data. We go out in the field and we run around and collect a bunch of field data. And then we come back to the shop and we're here at CSU and our offices assembling the data and standardizing it and putting it through scientific methodology. And then as we get that data into decision quality data, now we can start doing some calculations and looking at status and trends and start identifying those high priority places like PCAs to protect. And then finally, we roll that up into tools like Codex and communicate that all out to you. So hopefully, we can kind of empower your decision making with all the knowledge you need to understand the conservation of implications of your decision. And all throughout this process, it's important to think of this as ourselves as a collaborator. We listen to you. We're not advocacy based at CNHP. We exist to provide scientific quality decision data that you can trust in. We're always trying to stay on the leading edge of technology. So the code is the idea that we're bringing new solutions like Codex that help really lead Colorado in this arena. We share data in a ton of ways. A lot of really critical statewide efforts have been using CNHP data, including Colorado's outdoor strategy, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Colorado's habitat and connectivity plan. We've been supporting the State Wildlife Action Plan, the beaver strategy. There's a West-wide assessment of wetlands that's been going on, COMAP, and also the private lands, Keep It Colorado, Conserving Colorado 10-year roadmap. So we really are out there, not just in providing data online, but also trying to get actively engaged with statewide planning efforts and trying to bring our data to bear to help power those efforts. And one of the ways we do that is with Codex. And so with Codex, we have really brought together a dream of mine since I came into this field. You know, when I first came into CNHP 10, 20, well, now I'm ancient. I'm well over 20 years CNHPer. But I thought Colorado really needed an online interactive data mapping portal for conservation and other important data like recreation and diversity inclusion data and such. And this has been really an amazing process. First, we wanted to make sure that Colorado Parks and Wildlife saw the utility in this, and they most definitely did, and they've become our lead partner. They provide lots of critical data, being the lead agency in Colorado for wildlife, and now are having increasing responsibility for plants and insects. So we did not want to even do this if CPW didn't want to, but they saw the great need for this in Colorado too. And so early on, we had folks like the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust and Keep It Colorado wanting their members to be able to have access so that when they're considering new conservation easements and preserves, they can kind of prioritize some of that work by going after those best places to protect, that question 5. And we've had several other folks involved from NatureServe who really coded the original application that serves up Codex. CNHP, of course, we're the main home. We provide these trainings, put all the data in it, and run the thing. And then we've had several agency and NGO partners as well, with nice corporate gift from Chevron, so that we don't even charge commercial use at this point on Codex, and we're one of the only states that doesn't do that. Data wants to be free. We'd love to keep doing that as long as we can continue getting the support. Forest Service, BLM, Nature Conservancy, several agencies in the state of Colorado, including DNR, and we worked really extensively on Colorado's outdoor strategy. And Codex has really become a home for a legacy of tools that plan laid out, and I'll be discussing the plan just later in the chat, just so that you can learn a little more about it. So Codex, after it launched, has been just a total game changer for CNHP, getting our data out there, and really for Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the other partners that have their data on Codex as well. We've had over 150,000 page views since this thing launched. And just in the last year, since 2025, I'm kind of, to get a whole year, went back to 2025. We've had 62,000 views, and right now, there's over 3,462 registered folks on there. It's probably gone up a little bit since I checked with this training. There are over 700 organizations, and just the year to date, we've had 1,000 of you sign up. So thank you for the interest. It's really gratifying to see how many of you are using this resource on a regular basis too. Seeing so many reports run, with over 2,600 run in the last year. And for us, it's really gotten so much more of our data out there into people's hands are actually using it. One of the main products that you get out of Codex that really has a lot of the most beefy data is a project report. And this is a report you can run on any area of interest you have, and we'll show you how to enter some of those areas of interest to create your own reports in the live training here in just a moment. But in the main part of the project report, you get maps, regulatory species, which will be any federally protected species in your first list. And you can always tell you're going to a new section denoted by these blue bars on the table for regulatory species. And that's showing you that that's either the Endangered Species Act or the Federal Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. We had a really long stakeholder process in developing Codex, and a lot of our partners really need to have the federally protected stuff pulled out separately right on top. And so you get those there. And then we have other species of concern, which would be like your SWAP Tier 1 and Tier 2 species, Colorado listed, Forest Service, BLM sensitive, species fully tracked by CNHP, species of conservation importance that CPW is looking at or after, things like that. And then we have a section for special areas, land status and protection. And so this will review, are there any of those CNHP potential conservation areas, or maybe Audubon important bird areas or other special areas within your area of interest? And we pull in COMAP, which is another product CNHP runs. That's the map of Colorado's protected areas that shows all the conservation easements, wilderness areas, and land status basically for Colorado across the map. And so there's also a review of your surrounding land management. And then the report finishes up with a national wetland inventory review of the water and wetlands present on the site. And then another report that we have available, we call a return on investment. And it's based off of this work we did with the private land folks that is part of what seeded their initial interest in Codex, which they had been charged by the legislature in Great Outdoors Colorado to try to find a way to distill the value to taxpayers of providing the state tax credit. And Great Outdoors Colorado, which comes from Colorado's lottery, has provided a lot of funding for easements over the years as well. And they wanted to see, well, what are we getting for this? And we've now run this report a couple times, presented it to the state legislature. We've been there several times and helped to prevent the sunsetting of the conservation easement state tax credit, because when we ran the numbers, we found in this most recent version, for every dollar that they've invested, Colorado taxpayers get back $31 to $49 worth of ecosystem services. And this is things like, carbon sequestration and food and grazing and habitat, biodiversity, water quality, water storage, soil erosion control, and things like that. And when we roll all those values up, we worked with an eminent, world-renowned, actually, environmental economist who just happens to be at CSU. So we're incredibly fortunate to get to work with Dr. Andy Slidell. But he handled the economic part of the analysis, and CNHP led the habitat correlation and helped do the kind of spatial work and things like that in the background to come up with this report. But when we shared this report with the legislature, the Land Trust came to us and said, wouldn't it be amazing if anyone in Colorado could run this report for their own area of interest? And so that's what the ROI report is. And while we don't know your investment side, so it's truly the annual economic benefit of conserved ecosystem services on your land. And we infer those from the National Land Cover data set. And in the future, we may be developing a veg layer CNHPs that will let us get even more precise with this. That's a Colorado solution that we're hoping to develop. But the National Land Cover data set lets us correlate which types of habitat are present on the site, and then take these values, as you can see an example in the table, and then roll up a report. And so we've had everyone from local open space programs to just interested landowners, and of course land trusts, really curious. I'm going for a grant for maybe with the NRCS, and I want to get this equip grant on my property. So I'd like to demonstrate to the NRCS that this is a really cool project. Hey, look at this ROI report. I already have all these amazing habitat ecosystem services that are being provided by this land. Let's invest it to protect those. So it can be a great storyteller. It can be great to put in your grant applications. Lots of neat uses of this that we're seeing, and certainly not limited to just land trusts. So I did mention Colorado's outdoor strategy, and what Colorado's outdoor strategy is, it's a collaborative vision for conservation, outdoor recreation, and climate resilience. And it's really a 5-year plan that's a first in the nation. And Colorado has really been a leader to go after something like this. We came up with these North Star goals, and so this effort, I should say, was led by the Department of Natural Resources, Great Outdoors Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and Keystone Policy Center was our overall facilitators. In the Colorado Natural Heritage Program, I was able to lead the conservation portion of it as the PI of that portion, and we had SE group working on recreation, and we had folks from CU and many other collaborators that helped with this project. And when we came out with these 3 main North Star goals of climate resilient conservation and restoration, exceptional and sustainable outdoor recreation, and let's work together and coordinate planning and funding to get the maximum bang for our bucks and really the most effective work we can do. And so we really want to look at this as a foundational way to look at data in Codex too, and many of the layers in Codex came in as part of Colorado's outdoor strategy as layers identified and needed for the plan. And on that note, we can look forward to a new plan kind of tailored to the strategy coming out later this year that you'll be able to run in addition to the ROI and project reports. The outdoor strategies goals are really to not just, be a plan that sits on the shelf and never gets used, but this is something that is an active plan that, you go to Codex, you use these tools, you go to the resource hub and use the tools there, and they help amplify already existing efforts and really catalyze and strengthen things that are already happening on the ground, and really listens to local expertise rather than it just being a totally top-down plan. And through the regional partnership initiatives, it really provides a great pathway to sort of make sure that those kinds of things happen that you see on the screen. And for our role in supporting it, Codex really became a home, like I was saying, in the lead-in of a legacy of tools for Colorado to use. So this doesn't just become a plan that sits on the shelf, and many layers you all use on Codex are a result of it. We created a statewide conservation summary, which represents the array of biodiversity values known statewide. And so a conservation summary takes all of these different occurrence and species records from all the different partners and distills them into kind of a derived map so that it avoids some of the sensitivity issues of sharing precise sensitive species data, whether it's on public or private land, with some being collected. And also, of course, we want to protect private lands records. And so there's a lot of issues with sharing precise data. And so we created this surface so that you can see the biodiversity importance of lands. And we'll take a look at that layer. And that will be one that's also going to be coming up in that new conservation planning report. And we also took COMAP, which was the existing map of protected lands in Colorado, and we integrated a land protection status into it. So you can then kind of take a look at the landscape and see things which we know have good or very good protection. And if you're working in conservation, you can kind of see where the holes are, and kind of strategize your efforts around that. And we brought, as I mentioned, several pre-existing partner tools and layers so they'd all be in one place. An example for that is the Trust for Public Land has access to recreation data that is included. We'll take a look at here in a minute. And some nice links for you to grab here. There's a ton of tools, as I mentioned, at the resource hub. And so on the left, you'll see a QR code to jump over to the Colorado Outdoor Strategy Resource Hub. And here you can get dashboards for the state and by county for how much conservation summary value was there in that county. Where's the access to recreation? And there's also a toolkit that is just full of some amazing jewels. We have the Tribal Framework for Collaboration, which will be imminently featured at the Partners in Outdoors Conference this year, and has really been getting a lot of praise I've been hearing from folks as something that was severely needed, and something that CNHP's leaned on, as well as we work with Jem and other folks to work on our engagement efforts. We have currently a statewide natural heritage survey we're doing across Colorado and working with the tribes, following the principles of that. There's also an entire catalog, a database of all the plans in Colorado from the county and state level. So if you're working somewhere and you want to search through the plans in your geography to see, oh, maybe someone already has some funding that can collaborate with us, or maybe they have some ideas because they've already worked on this on what we should do. Natural, kind of that idea of catalyzing and collaborating, the outdoor strategy was after, providing those linkages for you there. And there's several story maps, including one on all the layers we developed for Colorado's outdoor strategy. And that's what that second QR code is. And I'm proud to say that it is now been updated. So I forgot to update the slide before today's show, but that story map is fully working. We had a layer change that we had to address. But anyway, so you can learn about all the layers in Codex that are supporting Colorado's outdoor strategy at that link. And we've also worked in other efforts. This is the Conserving Colorado 10-year roadmap for the future of private lands conservation in Colorado. And Colorado's Conservation Data Explorer Codex, and then also the Nature Conservancy has the Resilient Connected Network, which is also on Codex, as really the best available science and local expertise to help them prioritize their efforts and really go after the most meaningful projects for Colorado. And we're really happy to see Codex getting used in this way. And I know the Nature Conservancy really likes that the RCN gets included. So we're integrating climate and connectivity so that the projects we invest in have the best chances of surviving as we move into the future. And there's another way to look at this. I also is, how can I use all these reports if I want to tell a story? And so we did an exercise with several students at CSU, Keep It Colorado, and the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, myself, and some others worked on this as a way for you, whether you're a land trust, a local open space program, or just a landowner, who knows, but you want to tell your story with the data you can get off of Codex. And so this story map goes through the process of not just the return on investment, but also running that project report and really pulling out some really neat highlights to show kind of what is so neat about their efforts. And if you look at the story map, you'll learn a lot about cattlemen's and how their ecosystem services impact is over $1 billion a year in conserved ecosystem services, for example, and they have several SWAP and listed species on their lands that they're protecting. And one of the things that I like to share that was actually really scary for a lot of people when we started talking about this idea of having a codex is, oh, but if we put our data out there, everyone will see it and they'll see that it might not be perfect. Oh no, we can't do that. And a lot of other folks were like, well, but if we do that, then we expose those data gaps and we can address them. And it has turned out to be a really, really good thing. I mentioned this statewide natural heritage survey. Well, as we started pulling all this data together on Codex and started working with these regional partnership initiatives in a meeting with an initial conservation summary we made, you can see that on the left in blue, the areas of the darkest color represent the highest biodiversity. And there were some areas of white in Clear Creek County and some nearby other areas. And, we had a county commissioner on the call that says, I've hiked that area and I don't think that's right. And I think that you need to fix this. And it's like, well, if we look at the map on the right, Colorado has not been equitably surveyed from corner to corner, and you can see there's vast areas that have really been undersurveyed. And so it turns out this was a product of just not having enough data. And so now, through exposing this data gap, Great Outdoors Colorado and Colorado Parks and Wildlife and several other partners have funded CNHP to do the first full statewide Colorado survey, what we're calling Colorado Statewide Natural Heritage Survey. And we are so happy to be able to do this and fill in some of these data gaps and hopefully, form a process so that we can just keep filling those data gaps into the future. So we really, when you see things on Codex that aren't right, let us know. And we'd love to know it and address those issues as we can. So with that, I just wanted to share some quick updates and then we'll head on over to the map. We recently on Codex, we've added a ton of regional partnership initiative layers, and we have several on the way. Going to be meeting with a couple of regional partnership heads here at the Partners in Outdoors Conference to talk about some ideas for that. We have that HTCP study up there with its layers, and the SWAP layers are now live and fully available on Codex. You can also download them separately. And we'll be creating this new planning report I mentioned that will pull in the conservation summary, the conservation status from COMAP, and really be a report that's targeted towards Colorado's outdoor strategy, but conservation practitioners in general that want to get at some of those kinds of values. So like if I have a project area, could you tell me how much of this project area is in the top 30% of conservation summary lands in Colorado? Sort of things like that. And we'll integrate, all of these things into that report and launching this year, hopefully with any luck at all. We've got a really good start on it and hope to get it up soon for y'all. And sometime there will be a brand new map core, and in the back end, Codex is actually served on Amazon Web Services, so it's really fast, and it's running on an ArcGIS server. And NatureServe is fast at work at developing a new version. And this new version will fully work on your phone. If you've tried to use Codex in the field on your phone, you'll notice it doesn't have that resizability. and that version of ArcGIS server did not support that. So it'll finally work on mobile phones and also come with a lot of accessibility and security enhancements as well. So we have that to look forward to. And just some quick contact info. And I want to just take a quick pause, stop sharing my screen in case anyone had any questions that came up for the first part of the presentation. Great, I'm going to just look at the chat real quick and see if I missed anything. Looks like we've got, and Gilpin County also, correct. And I should have mentioned that. I actually was just getting to go and with my spiel and was thinking after I said it, I should have said Gilpin as well because it was the two counties. But anyways, thank you. And for those of you that have signed up for Codex, hopefully you're signed in and we can all kind of head over to our Codex page. And so let me get ready to do that. And I've got my mouse highlighter on. So when I left click, it's yellow. And when I middle click, you'll see a little icon. So hopefully that'll also help you be able to follow what I'm doing as I do the training. So with that, let's head on over to the map. And I have a couple versions of it open here. I want to get the one that is the public version. So from the main site, when you come into Codex, over here in the top right is where you would sign up for an account or log in. Once you're logged in, go ahead and just click on the map page and we'll all head over to the map page together. And I've already preloaded the map. It will take a minute to draw, and I'm not quite sure. We've had a couple. Oh, and I do see now we have one hand raised. Do you want to go ahead? Was it Derek? I missed your name. DB, it says on my chat. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, good morning. Derek Burr here. I had a question about when you were describing the Codex report, you had mentioned that wetlands were also generated within those maps. I had just recently generated a project in Codex, and it did not include wetlands or any of those water features that you had mentioned.
Oh, I'm wondering if maybe you ran the ROI report. If we're going to run one of those reports as part of the training here next, so we should see those. But yeah, you should definitely be getting the wetland info. And if it's not, maybe something broke in the back end since the last time I ran a report, which was literally yesterday. But it's always possible. So thanks for letting us know. And hopefully when we run a project report, you'll get those. And we'll also look at a report as well. Anyways, so now that we're logged into Codex, and Susan, if we get any questions while I'm doing the training that seem like they'd be helpful for the good of the group, please feel free to interject or raise your hand if you have a question. And if I see it, I can certainly call you out. But for the main controls of Codex on the top bar here, you can kind of pick whatever map you want. So say you wanted an imagery hybrid with roads, but also imagery, we can do that here. We can add resources. Whoops. We can add resources. So if I wanted to bring in my own stuff, I can do that as well. And so I can bring in a URL for an ArcGIS REST service. So these are online cloud hosted layers, or I can upload a file, including shape files, geodatabases from Esriland and ArcGIS, but also from Google Earth. You can upload KML and KMZ files. Not everyone has GIS, and really this whole program, Codex, in a way democratizes a lot of GIS functions for folks that don't have a license for a program like that, because so many of the functions in Codex are things you could do in GIS. And then the create project report, we'll come back, but this is where we'll enter our project request. And if you want to run just that ROI report, there's a button to run one of those alone. The create project button will run both the project report and the ROI report. And over here are some general map tools on the top of right of the bar. And we'll use the ID tool last when we start looking at some reference layers so we can practice using it on a layer. But the identify tool is your friend. Even without running a project report, you can get data out of Codex just using the identify tool, which will show you how. Some measuring settings and zoom to for coordinates. You can have save maps, which we'll discuss here in just a sec, print your view, snap to settings for your mapping. You can have save places, and I'll explain the difference between a save place and a save map. And for getting around the map, if you want, you can just use your mouse wheel to zoom in or out. If you hold the shift key and then draw a box, it'll zoom you right into where you zoomed in. And if you want to go back to where you were, you can use the back button. If you want the full state extent, you can use the globe. If you get somewhere really tiny and you're wondering where am I, there is this inset map available that gives an overview. And if you want to see nothing but map, this control gives you just the whole map and hides the layers palette. So just some different tools. And you can also control the zoom with the scale over here as well, obviously. So I'm going to go back to statewide view and say I wanted to work in this area west of Fort Collins regularly. And so I live in Fort Collins, and maybe this is an area where I need to keep returning because I'm working on some sort of project there. Maybe let's say by Comanche Reservoir just for fun. So you all can zoom into an area that's of interest to you. And now, since I want to keep coming back here, I'm going to do a spatial bookmark. And what this does is it doesn't save anything else about the map except where I am. And so I'll just say for mine, community training test location. And so now all these other ones, I can fly around and it'll just quickly go to where, and now I'm right back to the one I just created now. And so the spatial bookmarks will allow you to do that. If I start turning on layers here on the left in the layers palette, and I want those to be on when I get back, maybe I'm looking at swap data for certain species, or maybe I'm in the CPW data for mule deer or something like that, and I always need it to come up. That's where the save maps are handy. Is it does not ever have the ability to remember physical resources you bring in, so shape files and things like that, but any online hosted map services, those REST services, or any layers here you have turned on, when you do a save map, it doesn't just save your location, it saves what you had on. And so if I were to open Chicago Basin, and some of these services may not load, some of the federal ones have been taken down recently, so we may get some scary red boxes indeed. So those are layers that did not manage to come in because those GIS services are off. But that's actually great for training. Not all of the online hosted REST services are always going to be up. And of course, we don't host those. Those are not CNHP hosted or NatureServe hosted on the Amazon Web Services. So when you bring in external cloud resources, if their server's down that day, it just won't draw those. But you can see how it still pulled in the conservation summary, which is that blue layer in the background, and all these other layers I had on. So it returned to how I had it before. So that's the utility of the save map. The other thing is when you load one, you'll notice it has a URL up here that says save map equals 22204. As long as someone else has the same login level as you, and we do have folks that are on the partner level at CNHP, and so they would need to share partner level maps with each other, and those are folks who have special data arrangements with us that subscribe to CNHP data and have signed data licenses and such as that. Colorado Parks and Wildlife is a great example of someone who has access to all of that data. But in any case, so when we're looking at sharing this, they would need to share with each other. And then if I wanted to share with just my general normal JoQ public account, this URL, if I were to send it to someone else that had this general, it would load that map for them. So it's a great way to collaborate too, using these saved maps, or you want to send someone a map with something open, zoomed in somewhere, maybe even with some external map services. And when you send them that link, it'll pull it open for them. I'm going to go ahead and just refresh the map and remove that saved map. So we start over for this next section. But this is a good time to pause before we get into the ID tool and ask if anyone has any questions about the first part. I just want to make sure everyone's with us as far as switching around the map, adding resources. We'll come back to creating projects. So hold thoughts on that and these tools over here. I'm not hearing any questions. Go ahead. Oh, one hand just went up for CK. Go ahead.
Hey, just real quick, I bet you'll get to it, but doing the economic report, is that something that would be done here, or is that something you'll cover later?
You bet. So that ROI report button, if you just want the econ report, we'll run it for you. this create project button, which I'm going to demo both of these here in just a sec. But if you click the create project button, it'll let you run both the species kind of report with the wetlands and all that other data we were just talking about, plus the econ report that you were mentioning. Great question. Okay, with that, if you go to this find address or place, just think of somewhere that you would, oh, can someone, oh, do we still have another question?
Yeah, Gwen Cattell has her hand up. Gwen, go ahead.
Gwen?
Michael, in the chat, Gwen has requested that we slow down a little bit. If we,
You bet. All right, was there a question also, Gwen? Your hand's still raised. Okay, so I was going to suggest that we all go ahead and try to find
Okay,
a place.
I finally unmuted myself.
Oh, hi, Gwen.
Sorry, I'm probably the oldest person on the group. So you did a spatial bookmark, and I missed where you clicked to begin that process.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so and a good note is if you hover over the icons, it'll actually tell you what they are. But it's the save map that kind of looks like a little water droplet or a place marker here. And so I clicked that, and then I just went ahead and clicked save new to create a new one if I wanted. And so, and then when you're ready to load one, you just click the one you want and click load, and it'll take you to your save map like the one here that I just loaded. And this one did bring in some external map services, those REST services that I had saved. These are looks like some different forest activities for bark beetle outbreaks, and then recreation activities from the Forest Service. So these are Forest Service REST services. And if we go view details, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here, but just in case you want to add one, I'm just going to grab this since I know it's live and put it in the chat. And then we'll do that here in just a sec. Let me stop sharing here for just a sec so I can pay attention. And were there any other questions that, Susan, that we need to respond to?
I think we're on track, Michael. Yeah, just maybe slow down, and as you are showing folks, where to click or something, just give a little time for people to find where the mouse is or what have you. Thanks so much.
Of course. Okay, great. Well, so let me go ahead and go back to sharing now that I've got that in chat. Just a quick sec here as I jump around aimlessly for a second. Okay. And so let me grab that link again and go back to sharing. And so let's go ahead and add an online resource as an example. So if you can click the Add Resources button, and under the URL, this is going to be the online one versus the file where we could upload a shapefile. You can paste the link I just put in chat and just click Add Resource. You could give it a name. And so this one has a really bad name, but we can also, when we open this, we can get the full title, which is depicting the Western bark beetle strategy activities reported through the database. So this is the Western bark beetle activity by fiscal year, and then they also have by activity type. But anyways, this is an example of how we can do that. And then Gwen, if we go to save maps, now that we've loaded that, and you could even, if you wanted to, before we do that, you could say, oh, I want the imagery hybrid, and I want to be zoomed in by one of these areas. So I'm going to hold my shift key and zoom in, and you can do a save map now in this new location you're at. And if I say save new, and I'll say Western bark beetle strategy, EG, and save. So now if I go and I just go to the map, plain old, and then it'll just draw the statewide map. It's with all of us hitting it, I imagine it's going to get just a little slow with a little denial service attack happening here. and then so if I go down to my Western bark beetle strategy EG and click load, now you'll see that it comes up with all of the things that we had turned on, exactly where we had it. And if I were to take this URL and share it with anyone else, and I'm in a generic account, so if I were to put this in the chat here in just a sec, if you all click that link, it would open Codex, and when you logged in, you would see this. So anyways, that's why that's handy and a little different than a save map link. And let's go ahead and jump to the main map and review some of the layers in the layer palette. And that's where we'll get to try out the ID tool. So with that, if everyone wants to jump over there, first we just have reference layers. The layers palette's here on the left. Whenever you are looking at a layer and turning it on, there's a couple things to note. Parcels is a good example of this. Some highly detailed layers, when you turn them on, won't actually turn on statewide, or right now with parcels, Colorado would be almost solid black due to the small and mini parcels in Colorado. And so when we zoom in far enough, you'll notice that now that they've turned on, and I went to Lerner County because I know we actually have parcels for that county. We can see them. When I zoom out to a certain point, they turn off. And so, and if I have everything checked below, but don't have the top level checked, they don't turn on. So it's hierarchical. I need to have all those turned on. If it's gray, I know I just need to zoom in a bit to get them to show up, and then there they come in magically. For parcels themselves, we would love to have wall-to-wall parcels for Colorado, but we only have the ones that are publicly available from the Colorado Geospatial Gateway, or for counties that have been able to provide them to us separately. If you work in a county that does not have your parcel data on Codex and you have a way for us to get it, we can't pay $40,000 to $50,000 a year for one county's parcel data. We just don't have the budget to do that. But if there's a freely available source that we can use free and clear on Codex, we are happy to add any counties that don't have that. When you're playing with a layer, this flyout button here, when you hover over it, you get this arrow. We'll give you some layer controls. We can change transparency. So if you want to see through a layer more, we can move it up or down in the viewing. This one's actually on the very top, but we can move it down. If we have a feature in the layer, we can zoom to it. So and view details is going to be different than view description. So view details, as you know, is the ArcGIS REST service. And so when we click view details on a Codex layer, it's just giving us that ArcGIS REST service. And you could actually copy this and put it into your own ArcGIS mapping as a REST service, as long as it's not restricted outside of Codex. And some of the sensitive layers are. The other control that we had here was view description versus details. And that's where we give you actual, okay, here's where the data came from. And then, you know, these other counties came from. And if we have a link to a data partner for you to go get that data yourself, it'll appear in here. If it's a CNHP data set and we can allow you to directly download it, we'll put download information in here. Metadata, data about the data can go in here as well. So for that's the controls for the layers. And here's your parcels. So you can also turn on cities and counties, transportation, and this is township range and section from the public land survey system. So if you need for a legal description of a property or something like that. One of the nice layers to learn how to use the ID tool is the CNHP rare species and communities. So if everyone wants to turn that on, if we zoom out a little, you'll start to see these are 24K quads. And like that map we saw, that heat map, the darker the color, and this is a great example too to show you how a legend works. So pushing the plus shows me the legend for this layer, and I see the darker the color, the more rare it is, with G1s being bright red and then grays not having anything there or empty. And so having nothing at all. And so let's go to the ID tool up on that toolbar up on top. And then quickly before we start IDing, just to show there's a ton of tools in here, you can tell it, I only want, for example, CNHP, rare species and communities. If I had a whole bunch of layers on, it would be going through and telling me every ID, or maybe visible only, which is the default. So only the layers I've turned on are going to report results. And we can identify also just the top layer or all layers. And we're going to use a point for this example, but if you wanted to later experiment with using box, polygon, or line for your ID area, you can certainly do that. You can buffer it so you can grab nearby data. And I will definitely use the ID graphic so I can see what's going on. And so with your ID active, and you can just leave it at the default settings, go ahead and just click on one of these quads that has quite a bit of red color to it. And so here comes the Chambers Lake quad. It says 1 of 24, and it's going to give us all the species information, including what you would get in more of like a GIS layer, you know, ranks and links to NatureServe Explorer to learn more about this species, things about its sensitivity and legal status, and so on. Going through 24 of these could get rather annoying. But this is, like I was saying, without even running a project report, this is how we can pull data out of Codex. And this tasks button is your friend. So if you click the tasks button, it'll show results that we had rather than clicking through all 24 in one happy table. And you get the same kind of columns that we would got in the below. They're just now columns instead of labels. And then we can send this out to CSV if we wanted to bring it into Excel or other databasey things, or we could print it to PDF to include in a report. So without ever running a project report or an ROI report, just using the ID tool, we're able to really start uncovering and using some data. Since this is such a cool thing to do, did anyone get stuck on the ID tool that would like to ask any questions? Great. So pretty straightforward, but please don't. Oh, wait, LG has a question. Please go ahead.
Hi, so just to clarify, when you press the ID, you get the information summarized at the section township range square, is that right?
Oh, for our sensitive species data, this is the 24K quadrangle, and we just use the statewide 24K quadrangle maps to summarize our sensitive species data at a layer, that level that is not sensitive for the public. So everything that CNHP knows that's in that quad in our database is summarized, and then by the shading by the most rare element present. And so it's not TRS for this. This is quadrangles, but the TRSs are above this PLSS land system is the TRS. So, and as you can see, we need to zoom in more to get sections, but it's giving us township and range on this zoom level. So there you go. Good question. Any other questions on using the ID tool or anything else before we finish up the layer palette? And then we're going to do a project report together here after that. Great. Okay, so kind of going through this layer list a little more of some things that are available.
Hey, Michael, I have a question.
Please.
Thanks. This is Gwen Cattell again. So the Native Plant Society got a partnership with you. Mm-hmm. So when I log on, I'm only seeing the public layer. So how would I access that extra detail that we as a partner?
I did not see that you had signed up yet. I would need to escalate your account, and I have the others in your group. So somehow you got missed. If you would just send me a message, and I will definitely promote you as soon as the training's over.
Great. And I think also we're waiting for a board approval of that, so that there might be a delay that's not between you and me. I just remembered that.
Okay.
But thank you.
Yeah, we'll work that out. Thank you for the question. And if anyone else is wondering what we're talking about, so I mentioned this before, but we do have partner level access, and these are for folks like the Colorado Native Plant Society, Denver Botanic Gardens, or some NGOs that have that access, but also like Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Natural Resources Conservation Data Service, those kind of NRCS, those folks all have partner level where they can see CNHP data on public lands as is, versus by quadrangle as we are here. And it's still generalized, but they can see it at a higher level of precision on private lands than the general public can. But that requires a signed data license and a data partnership that generally involves subscribing to statewide data or being a research organization, maybe that has access for research reasons. But anyways, if you're interested in partner level status, we can always talk about that later. And back to the layers. Good question, Gwen, though. Thank you. All right. So we have, I was just about to say, we have these
Hold on.
range maps.
Michael?
Yes.
Hey, we just have a quick question about how to zoom in and out without using the zoom in and out. Like, can we specify the spatial extent without just zooming in and out?
The closest you can get is using the zoom bar because it has clicked extents, but you can't, I don't think you can just zoom, maybe using the zoom tool. Yeah, there you go. You could zoom to scale using the coordinates.
So back up. So how did you get that? You hit which
Yeah,
button?
so the zoom to tool,
Where was that?
I'm mousing it right now. It's in the toolbar on the top right.
Okay. So click there and then you can change the spatial extent right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
You know, that's the first time anyone's ever asked that. So honestly, hey, cool to see. I've never had to work at a specific scale for my job needs, but that's why it's in there. Some people do. So great
Yeah.
question.
Good question, Emily. Thank you.
All righty. I'm a big fan of the drawing a square with my shift key when I need to go somewhere. It's a good time saver. So, but anyways, going back to layers, we have these species range maps available. Again, when you want to see one, you need to turn on all levels or it won't turn on. So it's hierarchical. I go down the list and then now I can get to the lampshade. And this is where if I zoom to a layer using that flyout menu, we'll go statewide, but you can see now, okay, here's the present and within range of this lampshade weaver as a species range map. And that's just showing you again how if I turn this off, it turns them all off. It needs to be turned on the top level and then on down the list. But they're available for these species. And then a real treasure trove of data from Parks and Wildlife. If you need wildlife data in particular, is the species activity mapping data. A lot of times folks call it SAM data that have used it a lot over the years. But let's go ahead and look at elk as an example, real strong management species. We're going to go ahead and first need to turn on the top box for this layer so that it's active, and then scroll down to elk, and they're actually all pre-turned on this one. It's how CPW provides the data to us, and some are not all pre-turned on, and I think it's just CPW's preference. We can always change that later on, but I'm going to turn off several of these layers. And really what I like to think about is if I'm a planner, maybe I'm really wanting to know severe winter range and other really critical pieces of elk. Maybe I've talked with the CPW biologist and I said, we'd really like you to focus on these aspects, of production areas. And, maybe we want to really look at migration and highway crossings. And we want to look at the severe winter range. So now I've limited down that list. And, but, there's data available, as you can see, for just a treasure trove of wildlife in here that has been, made available for the public. So it's not too sensitive to share with the public. And if we zoom in and look at some of these areas for the elk data, we start to see, oh, there's the migration and a lot of highway crossing activities. And so, as a planner, you can see how some of this data would be invaluable. So a lot of using Codex besides rendering reports is truly just interacting and visualizing on the maps like we're doing right now. And we can always use that ID tool again by clicking on ID. And then we can ID this and say, okay, it was an elk production area. And there's only one here, but we could throw that again in a table if we wanted and say, okay, I wanted to identify that. Or we could draw a box around all of those using the ID tool. Like I was mentioning, you can do a box. And then I can say, okay, now here's all of those. And so I could then show results in a table. And now I'd say, okay, I want all of this. And I would get just all of that. So lots of ways to use that ID tool to interact with the data, but also just using visualization. Say you brought in your own data for a shapefile of a proposed trail and you wanted to see how it interacted, or maybe a new road or project site. You want to see how it interacted with all of this elk data. So that's the CPW species activity mapping data. Definitely one of the more heavily used data sets on here. And then newly on Codex are all the swap data sets. So we have the species maps, we have the terrestrial habitats and the aquatic habitats available for the State Wildlife Action Plan. Going down to special areas, those PCAs we mentioned that CNHP rolls up the most important places to protect too. And then CPW has created these high priority habitats, or HPHs, and originally they were created for Senate Bill 181, and the goal was to provide better siting information for oil and gas to include sensitive nearby environmental concerns and to hopefully mitigate and avoid those consequences. And so CPW has worked really hard on creating accurate HPHs for the state of Colorado, high priority habitats. In doing that, it's kind of become a proxy for wildlife value in general in Colorado. And so when we're trying to think of really high value, but these do have a actual, they are determined by the Wildlife Commission and they have a regulatory meaning as well. So, and the way these were made, a lot of them, it was really the building blocks were these species activity mapping files that we just looked at. And so these high priority habitats are going to be what CPW has identified as the most important habitats for, oil and gas leasing, but really, like I was saying, in general, they help pull out some of our most high priority habitats in Colorado in general. Fish and Wildlife Service critical habitat. So for protected species under the Endangered Species Act, any designated critical habitats in Colorado are depicted. So yeah, here's some down here. And if we want to know who it's for, we can fire up the ID tool, go over here, and it's Mexican spotted owl, critical habitat, just outside of Castle Rock there, up against the mountains. So another great layer. And we have wild and scenic rivers, the important bird areas of Audubon. These are really cool too. I definitely encourage you on your leisure to explore these because you get all these great links to eBird and to Audubon, and you can get species lists literally for that whole area before you go birding there. Really kind of a neat thing. Roadless areas, state land board, stewardship trust lands, which are lands the state land board is managing for conservation stewardship. From our conservation planning section, here's where that conservation summary is that we developed for Colorado's outdoor strategy that will be in an upcoming report. For now, it's just a visualization layer. As a reminder, this key here will let us change transparency, the little out key that I just clicked. And so maybe I want this a little more transparent because it's such a heavy duty layer. But if you look at the darkest areas of the state, it turns out the highest biodiversity value this particular study measured was just in the area west of Colorado Springs, which is not surprising given the amount of endemicism and biodiversity around there. But, anyways, just kind of, this is a great way to look at, I'm looking at a project area. How significant is the biodiversity in that area? Or I'm looking for cool new places to do conservation projects. Help me find some of the most high important, at least from the conservation summary viewpoint, a model's a model. But we've taken all those sensitive layers that only partners can see, as well as some data that even CNHP can't see, that's just CPW data and CNHP data like that, so that we can really distill a nice map for y'all as part of Colorado's outdoor strategy for planning. And kind of as a sort of nice matchup with that is the Resilient and Connected Network. And this is integrating the idea of having climate resilient and connected landscapes that we protect. And so where you see the shading on the map in the network version are going to be areas we really want to target with conservation if we can, particularly where resilience and connectivity come together. Biodiversity is also included in this map, but the conservation summary, besides being far more recent, is also much, much more comprehensive because it was a Colorado-based and not a national effort like the RCN was. But the abiotic portions of the RCN are fabulous. Drew, who's at the Nature Conservancy, and I went around doing a little roadshow with Codex and the RCN, and they work really well together, providing different pieces of things you can prioritize your work or learn more about the areas you're working in. If you want to know about the human footprint on the landscape, we have the Landscape Disturbance Index. So this is like, roads, oil and gas, alternative energy, agriculture, human development, basically, including trails from Cotrex. You can see, now maybe like we start integrating layers together. And it's like, well, if I was looking at the conservation summary, what's the highest value conservation summary area with the highest level of human impact? What's the lowest level of impact with the highest value? Things like that, where you start combining these things, you can start answering even more interesting questions. And terrestrial ecological system patches. So maybe you want to look and see large landscapes that are still of ecosystem capacity to do large landscape level conservation projects on. Or maybe you want to look at a portfolio of conservation projects and see, are we hitting all the areas, or are we just in rock and ice? You know, what are we doing? Are we
Hey,
really hitting
Michael?
all of the different things? Yes.
Michael? Yeah, can you just remind folks, where that transparency button
Yes.
is, and also just see how to see the definitions for the things, that are over, you know,
Yep. Okay, thank you.
like
And so I've just turned on the terrestrial ecological system patches again, and with the out arrow right here that you get by hovering over a layer, we can change the transparency. So like maybe we did want to, oops, I didn't grab the little slider. There you go. So we can go all the way from completely there to completely not. By default, they are somewhere around here on Codex so that there are some see-through. And again, we can move it up and down for draw order in case we wanted this to be most prominently on top of our map layers, or maybe it's just an informative layer and we want to move it down. And then the view description is where we get the data about the data. So if there's metadata, like you were asking, Susan, there's also a section of definitions in the reports, and there's under help definitions on the website as well. And you can download the data set here because it's a CNHP data set and we've made it available. So, yep. So did everyone catch that, the little out arrow here? Great. Alrighty. So, moving on to just doing a time check too. Want to make sure we're at 11:11, that we don't spend too long in the layer, so that we actually get to run some reports. We have the down here, wildlife and transportation priority results. This is like wildlife versus car, so transportation planners can use that data. This is a really cool thing here based at CSU. The CSU Center for Collaborative Conservation has an atlas. So using the ID tool again, if I ID one of these, you can see, oops, I misclicky. There you go. I'm going to have to zoom in because I am not hitting the dot. There you go. I am really doing a terrible job. So I'm going to now use a box because I apparently, oh, that's why, because I still have it on box. If I had point, it would be working. Okay. But so even the experts, if I'd gone point, we'll have problems sometimes. But now, so CSU Center for Collaborative, and it tells me, you know, what they're doing. So I can find natural partners for areas I'm already working in that are on the ground. And we can always expand the legend once again with the plus button. So if I want to know what area they're working in, oh, these are all forests and green, or orange is land use and range and habitat. So if you're working in an area and you want to find some natural partners, this would be a great layer to do that. For COMAP, we have two versions of COMAP, which will ultimately become one on there. One is the original version of COMAP, which shows you land ownership by manager. And so here, for example, the Forest Service lands are in green. All those orange lands are actually private conservation easements that have been protected across Colorado, while the bright red are private preserves that have been protected. The purple's going to be national parks. So that kind of a layout. But then we also have by conservation. And in the future, we're going to integrate these two layers together. There's a fair bit of legwork in doing that. But now we can take a look at Colorado by how well things are protected. And so anything in green is good or very good. And we actually, for private lands, we don't actually assign a level of protection because we don't want to make a value judgment on private lands unless they have a conservation easement or some other formal thing we can judge that's a land management description that's meaningful to COMAP. And we certainly don't want to judge people. Maybe one of the most well-conserved pieces of land is a ranch no one gets to visit that they just have amazing conservation practices on. So that's not for us to decide. And also, we do not score tribal lands and really respect tribal sovereignty at CNHP. And so you'll notice that we've just grayed out that whole area and said unknown because that's not, again, in our purview at this time. So as part of outdoor strategy, that was critical to do. But anyways, so again, starting to think about questions we can answer. Now maybe show me the least protected, highest value conservation summary lands with the lowest human footprint. So again, multi-layer things, and by running reports, we can kind of get some of those values. And the coming conservation report that we're going to be putting out, we'll pull in yet even more of those. For recreation data, we have trails from Codex, gold medal waters, and this recreation atlas and the water atlas are not to find your next recreation spot. Like Cotrex really shows you trails you can go hit and have fun on. This is more about like equity in recreation. So how far do I have to go? Like this TPL layer, let's just turn it on real quick. To get, I'm gonna turn off the water access. I just want to know like a 10-minute drive to all recreation. So a lot of Colorado does not have a 10-minute walk to recreation. If I throw on 10-minute drive, a lot more of Colorado, if they're able to drive, can get there. So we can start seeing about where to provide recreation in places people don't have access to it. Same thing with water recreation, but in this case, this came from American Whitewater, and they provided recreation points where there is water recreation across Colorado to kind of complement the TPL, since that's their specialty, and they have a much deeper data set for water points. So we added that as well. These are examples of layers, these two that we brought in from Colorado's outdoor strategy into Codex. Natural features, you can get land cover. That national land cover data set, that has the habitat types. We're inferring the return on investment economic report that we mentioned. There is also ecoregions, if you need to know what EPA ecoregion you're in. For soils, we have full soils here, but you'll notice it's defaulted to farmland because we found so many people were coming here just to find significant farmland soils, and so we've broken them out by type. And you can get all the farmlands of significance like prime farmland. One thing, of course, is in Colorado, without water, you can have all the special soil you want, and it's probably not going to be that great unless you have water to go with. And then geology, we have Southwest Regap for geology. And coming kind of finishing up here on the bottom, we have all the water and wetlands data. In wetlands, we can do another one of those grayed out layers to show nothing's turning on. Why? Well, I need to zoom in. And so once I zoom in far enough, then all of a sudden we have wetlands, and we can see, you know, the type of wetland with the key again, the legend by expanding the plus. And to just repeat Susan's question again, transparency, we can adjust with that flyout arrow. We can also get description of, you know, how to get information about what we're looking at and such as that. So anyways, there's also rivers, seeps, and streams. A lot of times I just turn these on as a default when I'm working, because I like to cover the official maps provided with the water bodies to really pop them. You might like that too, as a little fun thing to do. Aquifers and watersheds. Watersheds are a great unit to use as a request for an area because they're biological boundaries. We go all the way from the small Huck 6, or I mean the large Huck 6 to the small Huck 12 watershed levels. So many different levels to choose from. We have hazards and risk data on here, including fire risk from Colorado State Forest Service. And you can see previous fire perimeters, the WUI, the wildland urban interface, and the potential fire intensity scale. And we have preliminary floodplains from FEMA. There are not 100-year floodplains wall to wall for Colorado, something I did not know until putting together Codex. So you'll note there's not statewide coverage for those, but if you're in an area FEMA has done the flood mapping for, those are there. And for invasives, we have some species maps there, and we have the state listed species official EDS maps for noxious weeds. So both range maps CNHP is developed, and then the state resource. For human dimensions, we have EnviroScreen, and this is like an environmental justice layer that shows the most impacted communities, the most burdened communities in terms of things like pollution and access to various different things. Highly recommend that view a description and head on to the main website if you're interested in this, because they have a full-on version that goes even more in depth. But we go down to the block level here, and we also have the old disproportionately impacted communities layer that Colorado Department of Public Health had before this layer, because some oil and gas operators still need to use that layer for regulatory reasons. And then regional partnership initiatives, I mentioned those. earlier. This is the grassroots effort of Colorado on how to get so it's not just a state top-down approach, but we have local communities leading. And you can see Colorado is starting to have one just about on everything. And many of these white areas have some in progress of being formed. So we're going to need to get a new version of this layer very soon. And as they get their own custom layers that's just for their region, you can find like the Central Colorado Outdoor Partnership has several neat tools they've developed, like this planning for wildlife tool that I'm going to turn on now. And so if I go zoom in and look at that, you can see that this is just for their regional partnership that's developed a set of planning tools. And you'll find that for several of these that are in here. And there's yet more of these regional partnership initiatives of data in there. The HCCP data is in here. There's several layers in here. I'm not going to go through every single one. But the habitat conservation restoration landscape is a good one. It shows you which has the greatest conservation potential. And then these habitat priority layers will show you which have the highest priority for conservation. And you can also look at the HUCs, which are those watersheds, by the rank. And so if you want to get to see which watersheds are most highly prioritized by the Habitat Conservation and Connectivity Plan, that would be where to do that. This projected land use is pretty neat. This is what the USGS is expecting to change between now and 2050, and then all the way to 2100. So maybe landscape conversion to development, maybe agriculture changing to something else, things like that. But through their program, they're projecting those parcels to change. And then the landscape diversity is a modified product from the HCCP from Nature Conservancy. And then we have administrative boundaries to finish it up. So several administration boundaries, and then just this COMAP thingy. So that's all the layers. That's quite a layer palette. Like I say, you can just using visualization, playing these layers, get a heck of a lot out of Codex without even running a report, and especially using the ID tool, and then going to that tasks button after we ID something with multiple results and throwing it in a table. Susan, I'm going to pause for another round of questions, and then we need to kind of focus on running a project report before we run out of time. So go ahead with the question.
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit about exporting these data from your project? Can it be into a geodatabase, or does it have to be only as a PDF?
Yeah, so to get the spatial data, if it is available, you would go ahead and do the view description and download spatial data. One data set actually that's on here does have a special all-in-one download for it, the HCCP study. You can actually, sorry, I'm going down there. With the question mark here, download the full data for the HCCP from the top level for all of these layers at once. So, and if you want this precise species data, which I bet is that question's really about, when you get your report, there's contact info for Colorado Parks and Wildlife and for CNHP, and you can follow up whoever's data it is that you're trying to get the data for, and we'd probably need to sign a data license to protect the data. There may be a fee associated with providing spatial data from CNHP. I don't think CPW there is, but we do have to have some cost recovery on some level. So, and that does help keep the database up to date when we provide those precise spatial data requests. And so, but yeah, you can't export layers directly, but you can use them if they are not sensitive in other projects. So that's the last thing I want to answer about your question, Susan. Then we'll go to some of the how to run a project report. But if I go to like, sorry, I'm getting distracted now. Oh gosh. Sorry, I'm multitasking too much and my brain just went ka-chunk. Sorry. Susan, can you remind me what I was just about to say?
I think you were going to be going on to how to do a project report, how to export that.
Yeah, I thought there was still something on your question I was going to answer. I'll definitely move to that next. But okay, I know what it was. I apologize. Sorry, folks. It's just so much. If you want to bring in a layer that is not sensitive, you can do the view details. In this URL for a REST service, you can add that to your ArcGIS program. by adding online data sets. And I'll let you Google how to add a REST service to your ArcPro project, but this URL, and we got there again by that out arrow, and it's view details, which I think in some ways that label should just be view GIS service, but it gives you the details of the GIS service. So I guess that's why we have that label. But anyways, yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, let's go on to the project report then. So for this exercise, we're going to first do one by just drawing a request area. So I'm going to stick to my west of Fort Collins area, draw a box, get somewhere kind of close and an area I find interesting. And here I am in Box Prairie and Donner Pass. Let's do Donner Pass. The infamous Donner Pass. All right. Although not the infamous one. And then to create a project by hand drawing, first click the Create Project button. It actually opens default, but these are different buttons for presenting projects in different ways. The one with the little pencil, and you'll notice it's orange, is how we hand draw a request area. This is the easiest way to submit a project report or one of those economic ROI reports. If I zoom out too far, it's not going to let me draw. So you, just like those wetland layers, you have to be zoomed in to a certain extent to be able to hand draw an area. Once you're there, to begin your drawing, just left click once and then left click for each point you want to add. You can see the little yellow time each time I click. And then when I'm done with my shape, I just double click. And now let's say that's the area I wanted to run a request on. And so I'll just click accept. And that's all there is to it. And is, clicking that create project button, using the hand draw method, making sure you're zoomed in far enough, click, 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 double click, and then you have to fill this out wherever there's a red asterisk. So I'll just say community training example. Say this is a conservation project. For your project type, just select whatever you want it to be. It actually doesn't influence the results, but you should know in other states that have these ERTs like Codex, that you might, environmental review tools like Codex, that you might actually get different results based off the activity if they're used in a regulatory way. Like I think in Nebraska, the distances that they search for species could change based off of what you pick. But here in Colorado, we're just recording the activity type. And then buffer value, there's a minimum of a 1 mile buffer required. CPW and CNHP have never shared their sensitive data in public like this before. And so to be able to pull this off, we needed to require that minimum of a 1 mile buffer, both for private land sensitivity, but also, there are folks that unfortunately, even well-meaning folks that will go and trample a bunch of rare plants on their way to find one known rare plant location, or maybe even unfortunately sell these things on eBay or something. So that's why we have a minimum. But there's also another good reason, which is that we have not mapped Colorado wall to wall, as you saw in the presentation. And so by mapping nearby habitat, it helps us pull in things that might have been mapped nearby that may be present on our site. So it really is a good idea to normally use a buffer when we're talking about conservation data, due to that survey effort issue. And so we'll go ahead and I'm just going to pick the default one, but pick whatever you like. I mean, if you're really super, excuse me, keyed into raptors, maybe 4 miles would be good. And so then it pre-fills your contact info from your registration. And I told you you could run both reports. Just click return on investment and submit. And then you'll get both the project report and the return on investment report. If I had clicked this ROI report, same idea, but I would only get the economic report to the person who asked that question earlier without all that project report species info. Most people just use the click create project button to get both projects at the same time, but you can run just an ROI report like that. And so now we've created that project. I'm going to go ahead and have you all create one more before we look at results. So go ahead and click create project again. And this time I want to use parcels to create a data request. And so what I'm going to do is this button, I'm going to introduce 2 more buttons too, but this button is where advanced mapping options, it says, but we can use map layers. And that means anything on that left palette, we can use those boundaries like a parcel or like a watershed boundary to make our area of interest. From make a map, I'm not going to go over this in detail today because we just don't have enough time, but you can customize the map with make a map features. And if features you drew in there like hand drew, you can pull in, and you can also just enter coordinates. This folder would let you upload a shapefile, a Google Earth file, or a geodatabase to sketch out your area of interest and go from there. So let's go ahead and just click this middle button and go to map layers. Once you're all there, you'll get a screen that says additional mapping options. And we wanted, in this case, we're going for parcels. And so I'm going to click parcels by county up top. And then I need to pick a county you actually have parcels for. And the list is here. I'm going to do Lermer because I keep hanging out Western Fort Collins. And then you see the select from resource button. It's going to draw the parcel layer. And then I need to make sure I'm in Larimer County to get it. But once that's there, I can then, and this tooltip will tell you, click to select or deselect features, hold control and drag to select multiple. And so like if I just click this, I could just say accept and have this as a project, but maybe it's like a multi-part thing. And I could do this with drawings too and have more than one drawing as well. But let's say it's these three, or maybe I wanted to control click and just draw and say, oh, it's this whole dang area. So I held the control key and drew a line around the stuff I want to select. So now I've selected all of these parcels and I'm ready to click accept. And when I do that, it creates an area of interest based off of the features I selected in that last screen. And it is a little complicated, so I'm going to do it one more time. And so again, from the create project button, we go to this middle map layers. I chose to do parcels, which I think would be a great example for everyone. I'm in Larimer County, so I pick Larimer. And then I click select from resource. I can hold control key, select multiple. I can also individually click on ones. I can also, I didn't mention, but I can deselect by clicking like that. Once I'm happy with my selection, I'm going to click accept, and you can see that one it took out from me clicking on it again in the center. And so then I'm going to go to next. At this time, we could do more edits. And by the way, the editing buttons, you can do lots of things with the edit button here, including pull the little bars to change your shape if it was hand drawn, erase things, crop, buffer. You can even change the way hand drawing works and go freehand or disable the cursor tooltips, which I don't know why anyone would do that, but the freehand's kind of nice if you don't want to do the click, click, click thing. But I'm ready to accept. So this is all I'm going to use. I used the map layer parcels, and then I would just fill out this screen again. And since we've already done that, I'm not going to fill out the screen again. Yes.
Can you, when you have multiple polygons in your project, can you ask for those data to be separate, the results to be separated out for
No,
each?
you'd want to run a separate report for each polygon.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yep. Okay. And so the last thing I wanted to show as far as how to create projects is how to upload a shapefile. And actually, let me, I think this will work. Let me stop sharing for one quick sec. I'm going to throw a file up here for you all. Let's see here. If it will let me. Now I'm not sure it's gonna, let's see here. It's not letting me upload it. Why? I don't know. I was able to do that before. But no workies, sorry. If you have a shapefile or Google Earth file, please be able to follow along on this section. I will note too that I've recently recorded videos for all of these methods that we're showing you today, and they're available on that Colorado Outdoor Resource Hub link that we had on the left of that slide, and they will soon be on the Codex site. We're just working through some bugs on one of the videos that got cut off unnaturally, and once that's corrected, these are just hot off the press. They will be available prominently on the Codex site as well. But how to make a project report, how to use the ID tool, and project reports from hand-drawn shapefile and using existing map layers. So I apologize. I thought I was going to be able to share a shapefile in the chat, and I haven't been able to figure it out in time, and I want to keep going. So I'm not going to do that and just demo this part. So I navigate from the folder button now, from the create project button that I click to get here, and just navigate to a folder that has a shapefile and a Google Earth file. And if I go into this shapefile, it needs to be projected data. So it needs to be like UTM. It can't be a geographic coordinate system. It needs to be projected. It needs to have all your typical shapefile pieces for those of you that work in ArcGIS land. And then when we do it, we want to actually zip it to the layer where it's, if I were to zip this, it wouldn't work because it'd be a folder and a folder. I want to grab all of these and zip it at the root level, you know, so that there's not a folder within a folder, and then I can upload that on a Codex. Or here I have a shape file from Google Earth that's a KMZ. So you have KMZ and KML from Google Earth that you can also upload to sketch out your area of interest. I'm going to use this zipped shapefile as an example, and it will just upload it. And then if I had multiple shapes, I would need to click like we did on that choose from a map which ones I wanted if I had a multi-part shape. This one's in fact just a single shape as an example. So I would just click accept and then again fill out that same create project screen. And now I've again just done this from create project, click the folder, uploaded a shape from a pre-existing map I'd saved, and then I was done. So you all now know how to pull data out of the map with your ID tool and this create project button. You can hand draw, you can use existing map layers like the parcels or watersheds, or even upload your own shapes to sketch areas. So with that, I'd like to take a quick second while I open the projects tab and go ahead and click my projects. I bet the ones that we submitted might still be cooking and not available. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. But I will say when I entered this field 20 years ago, it would have taken me 6 months to pull together these kind of reports. So 5 or 10 minutes is pretty darn cool. But anyways, any questions while I get into some training examples to look at here?
Feel free to raise your hand or enter into the chat if folks have questions.
Thanks, Susan. And so when I go into the projects tab, I went into a list here of all the ones I've done, and I just said training example as one to open. I have several, as you might imagine. And I get this list of products that came out from my request. There's the project report that has all the species and whatnot in it. Even if I hand drew it, I'll still get a shapefile of what I did. Or I used existing map layers, it's going to give me a shapefile. The project report provided a CSV. So again, you could bring it into Excel or other databasey things. That return on investment report, that is going to be the economics angle, and then the KMZ, which is the Google Earth file. If you sometimes have to click it to generate it, but you can then also get a Google Earth file of your area of interest. So I'm going to go ahead and open the project report and the return on investment report. If you have one that is actually already cooked and ready to go, feel free, but this will work great just looking at mine for kind of calling out some key things. So we'll look at the ROI report first because it's fairly short. The return on investment report is going to give you the link to the studies and an equation basically of how to calculate an ROI, and then some disclaimers. We're not replacing land appraisers here with this. This is not a replacement for a land appraisal or anything like that. You get your map of where we were. Looks like that shape I just entered, the same shape I just showed you guys the example of. I swear they've changed teams because I was able to add a file to teams before in a training, so something must have recently changed. But here's where it's inferring the habitat types from that national land cover data set, and it's calculating every pixel, extrapolating out to acres, and then we get this list. And for this one site, then we get the different systems listed and then a total range. And it's going to be a broad range because this is not settled science. This is fairly rocket science. So this one project site that we looked at did on an order of 20 to 27 million a year of annual benefit of conserved ecosystem services through things like carbon sequestration, habitat, and water quality, water storage, things like that, erosion control, and that sort of thing. So any questions on the ROI report before we go to the project report? Oops, I clicked the wrong tab. Yes, please, Kramer, go ahead.
Just curious about adding in the recreation component to that.
Yeah, so for the planning report that's coming, the new conservation planning report, we're going to pull in some more recreation layers, that the ones that we have as far as Cotrex, and we're trying to figure out the best way to report out the TPL data. But I will put my email in the chat, or Susan, if you could do that now too, that'd be great. But if you want to talk to me about what would be useful from a recreation standpoint as we develop this report, I'd be more than willing to take some input too, or other recreation experts on the line. Or if there's a recreation layer we don't have that is something that is well accepted and statewide, we could certainly consider adding it. And that goes for any other layers that anyone else on the call thinks is missing. So thank you. Yeah, good question. I agree. We need more of reporting available for the recreation data. So we're working on that. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the project report, which, oops, apparently, here it is. Okay. And so for this guy, it starts out with also some, besides the disclaimer, some background, and there's definitions at the end of the report and contact info for CNHP and CPW in case you want to try to get precise data for the species revealed in your report. Here we're seeing the locator map and then the search boundary that was used. And then, of course, it does give you a locator map for Colorado. I forgot to point that out. This is going to be the COMAP map, and so land management status, and we see here we're on National Forest Service land, but there's also a nearby conservation easement and some state land, as well as some BLM land. So a unique opportunity and some just private land to work across several different land ownerships to maybe do a collaborative project. And then we get into the meat of the report, which, the way you can tell you're in a major section are these big blue bars that say regulatory species. So these are just the federal stuff. And for the species, there's two tables. We have the documented, like we've got a record on the ground of this thing from field work kind of a thing. And then we have potential, which are going to be, it could be a range map. It could be a really low precision ancient historic record. Like some guy in the year 1900 said he was 5 miles west of Denver. Well, what is that? It could be a model that we've created to try to, find where we might go look for these species, but it's not known occurrences. So that way, again, the state hasn't been thoroughly surveyed from corner to corner. You kind of get the best of both worlds, what we know and what might be there. As you go across these species lists, these hyperlinks will generally take you to NatureServe Explorer, potentially Colorado's rare plant guide that CNHP runs depending upon the species. And so you'll get more information about the species, common name. This data type is important because it tells you basically where it came from. This is a CPW occupied habitat for Gunnison sage grouse. CNHP-EO is an element occurrence. We do have definitions for things like EO in the definitions at the end of the report and also on the help section of the website. And we're continually adding definitions as well. So don't be bashful if you see something. Feel free to send Codex support an email if you have questions, which is also, that email address is also included in the front of all the reports in case you have questions to reach out. And then we have those global and state rarity ranks from NatureServe and our program. And some of these will only be for heritage data, like the viability rank is just for Colorado National Heritage data, and H would be historic, but you might have an A-rated occurrence, which means it's a very viable occurrence. Last observation, mostly for CNHP data, all nines indicates that we didn't have good data on that, so it's a fill-in spot. ESAs, your Endangered Species Act status, Colorado's listed status, other status. This is where we get to reveal swap tier 1 and tier 2, BLM Forest Service sensitive lists, such as that. For CNHP data, again, a unique one just for our data is an identifier. If we have that number for data you're interested in, maybe you want to get the precise spatial, that identifier tells us exactly what record you're talking about. And then the data source, we actually just have started receiving some updated data from CPW and are preparing a CNHP update as well, but you can tell the year of the data was uploaded onto Codex in this data source column. So anyways,
we got
yes.
a report that the videos stopped. Let's just check and make sure that's an isolated incident.
Okay, can someone else in the chat chime up?
I can see you fine.
We are pressing the limits of this version of Teams with the amount of attendees, so I think the next time.
Like it's working fine for other folks.
Okay, well, let's move forward. And to anyone that's having a problem, we are recording this and we'll send it out to all the attendees afterwards, as well as anyone else who's requested it. Feel free to share this across your networks as well. But in future trainings, we're going to continue dropping community trainings. We may explore a sort of bulked up version of Teams that is a little more hardcore for larger gatherings like this. We weren't quite sure of how large a crowd, and thankfully this version says it supports up to 250, so I think we're good today. But maybe that's why some people are getting some odd behavior, because that's like the second or third report we've seen of someone having echoes earlier and some other things. So thanks.
So, and then Michael, just real quickly, do we have the USGS protected area data as one of the layers?
Okay, so the USGS Protected Areas Database is a database that COMAP. Let's go back to this map of COMAP. The Protected Areas Database is COMAP in Colorado. The advantage of COMAP is we had a years-long, too long of a story to share here, deal with the private land folks where they were providing data to us, but not to the national PAD US and National Conservation Easement data set, which unfortunately, Ian said, the National Conservation Easement data set has recently been shut down due to federal budget cuts. And the USGS PAD US has had their budget massively cut, but does still exist. And I was just on the call last week with the PAD US community call, and COMAP does provide data, but for our private lands data, due to some historical agreements with land trusts in Colorado, some of the agricultural ones did not want their data going to the national data set. And so really COMAP is going to be far superior to PAD US if you're working in Colorado, because it has that, and we get data from CPW, but it also has the additions of the data that's unique to Colorado, like our really robust conservation easement data that's part of COMAP. But great question. Okay, well, kind of finishing up the report. We're running fairly low on time, so I just want to get through this report, and then we can open it up to broader questions or any specifics. But we talked about the federal species, and then the last piece of that was the critical habitats. So in this case, there was the Gunnison sage grouse designated critical habitat from Fish and Wildlife Service. So that, again, that regulatory species, that's just a federal. We have this whole other species of concern list. And that's where we get, you know, swap tier 1, tier 2, and all these different occurrences that come in that wouldn't have been included, the federal list. So much lengthier list usually. We already went over what those categories mean. And then we get the potential again. One thing I wanted to note too is, so notice it says document occurrences within 2 miles. That means the buffer distance was applied. We specified when we made our project request, and in this one I requested a 2-mile buffer. When you see within project area, no buffer was applied, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to apply a buffer for potential when it's modeled data. You know, it's not sensitive. There's many reasons why we wouldn't need to use a buffer, even scientific ones. So no buffer applied for that. And just so you know, as you're reading your table title, if you were curious if the buffer was applied, it will say within a mile or 2 miles, or where your buffer was, if it was used. So this potential, again, modeled species, ranges, old historic records, and we're going to go a lot more potential again, because we have not mapped the state thoroughly statewide. And so this list should always complement your others. And then we go into another major section of this report, special area and land status. And here's where we get those CNHP PCAs, but also the high priority habitats that are, you know, the regulatory component that is a great proxy for wildlife habitat in general, like I was mentioning. These PCAs will take you to a hyperlink of a report about that PCA that CNHP has created, so you know more about the site description and what are the driving elements of biodiversity that the site was drawn for, like a Gunnison sage grouse or what. And there's also, if there's Audubon important bird areas, here's one that would link out to the Audubon important bird area website. And again, we could get species list for that Gunnison Basin important bird area. So those are going to be special areas. Managed areas, so the PAD US person, here's the breakdown from COMAP of the lands that were inferred. In the future version of the report, the conservation plan report, we are also exploring looking at integrating that COMAP conserved status. And for those of you that are familiar with GAP status codes, we developed for conservation, and the PAD US person on the call probably knows what I'm talking about, but GAP status codes are a way to determine how well lands are conserved. And the national GAP status codes that are used do not count private lands conservation generally as conserved. And in Colorado, as you've seen, we have invested a ridiculous amount of money in private lands conservation, and it has provided some amazing benefits back to Colorado. And so we certainly want to include it as part of our conserved state. And so as part of Colorado's outdoor strategy, we came up with our own methodology, which is available through the strategy. It's completely transparent process to be able to include those based off the management descriptions of the lands as conserved. So in any case, this is the reflection of what is in COMAP, and the forthcoming report will also mention the conserved status and potentially acres as well. And then you finish the final section. Someone asked about the water and wetlands. We're in the project report. That's where the wetlands data is, and it gives you your NWI code for the wetlands type, spells out what that type is, your total acreage, no, buffer applied here. Obviously, it's not in the table. And so you get the acres of each of those, and then we go into the definitions about data and such. So with that, thank you all for amazing attendance. And Susan, I really appreciate you keeping an eye on the chat. You didn't know you were doing this until about an hour before the presentation. So everyone give it a round of applause to Susan for being a trooper and making sure you all got taken care of.
Oh, thank you, Michael. And before we close, can you make sure you let everybody know where to get any additional training information on Codex? Is it on our website?
Yeah, and actually it's on the front page of Codex. We're going to start placing training, and it's on the front page of the CNHP site. It's available across Colorado State University calendar. So if you go to the CNHP homepage, we have taken just the CSU calendar for CNHP events. So we may also have volunteer trainings you'd be interested in. So if someone can just put the CNHP homepage in the chat for folks, that would get you our calendar that would include all trainings that we do, not just Codex. But thank you all for attending. Any other questions that someone would like to ask before we break? We still have about 9 minutes.
What about the NA BAT data?
NA BAT data. Well, there is an NA BAT data site that is a subsite off of CNHP. So while we're chatting, I will grab the CNHP website link and the NA BAT site link. But there are bats in Codex, if that's the question. So I have the Colorado Bat Working Group website, which will get you links to what you're after. So let me put that in the chat for you. And then for our main site, where that calendar is to see future trainings or other opportunities CNHP has going. Julie Kallenberger is our communication outreach person, and she posts other events as well there. So in case you need to learn more about, how to volunteer with the Statewide Natural Heritage Survey or other cool things that we're organizing, be sure to check that calendar for fun upcoming stuff. Great. Well, thanks everybody. Not seeing any other questions, but we super appreciate the interest.
Lindsay, you want to go ahead?
Please, Lindsay. Sorry, I didn't see you.
No worries. Can you hear me?
Uh-oh, I don't hear you.
Lindsay, you've got your hand raised, but we aren't hearing you. It looks like you have got your mute on.
Oh,
okay. Well, feel free to.
That's right, Lori. Yep.
In the chat or follow up via email if you have a question still, Lindsay, with your microphone not working.
Yeah, we'll be happy to. I can also meet one-on-one. And if you have a group that wants a dedicated training, let us know. We can schedule that. We have some funding to cover my time to do that as well. So besides these general community trainings, like I just recently did one for the Colorado Resiliency Office, it's part of Colorado State government. We can certainly do one-offs as well. And if there's like a custom training example we want to use for the project report for areas of interest important to your people, we can do that as well. So, and Lori just put in the chat the link to the training videos that I recorded. And as I mentioned, one of them is unnaturally cut off. And as soon as I get that fixed, we're going to have those on the Codex site as well. But thank you, Lori, for posting those. And happy Earth Day.
How will people access the recording of this training, Michael?
We will send it to every single attendee, and we will post it on the Codex website. And also, I have a request from several other individuals to share it with them and encourage you all to share it with others if it would be useful.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Feel free to follow up, email, or if there's anything quick in the chat here, we'd be happy to stay in touch and get back with you.
Happy Earth Day, everybody.
Bye.
I'll stick around if anyone wants to stay, but I'll close the meeting at 10 if no one, or at noon if no one does. Oh, it looks like I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I should have done that earlier since we don't have any questions.